Good Friday service of reflection on the people with Jesus. We sometimes feel that we are not good enough, that we are too flawed, too human. Today let's focus on the people Jesus had around him, the people who he loved, the people he chose. And to remember that, together with the fact that he came to earth to be human, to understand human emotions, human life, to know us and understand us deeply, and ultimately to show us all how much he loves us, his people.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow, to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing.
The disciples, the ones who were tired and weren't the best friends they could be. Jesus only asked them for one thing: stay awake and look out for me. He was tired and scared and knew there would be people coming soon who wanted to kill him. All he asked for was for them to keep an eye out. All he wanted was for his friends to care and to stay awake. But they were human. They were tired. They just didn't realise why it mattered to him. Like so many of us, they had that moment when they weren't the best friends they could be. They were just exhausted and they didn't have any more to give. They were human. They were flawed. They weren't perfect. But they were the people Jesus chose and loved.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him.
Judas, the one who was selfish, greedy, or misguided. Judas, the betrayer, the one who gave Jesus up for money. Was he desperate? Struggling? Couldn't resist the temptation of the things money would give him? Or was he misguided? Did he doubt Jesus? Was he swayed by popular opinion, thinking that maybe what he was doing was the right thing after all. And he got the money, did the job, but looked back at what he had done and regretted it. He looked back and saw he was wrong. He was human. He was flawed. He was far from perfect. But Jesus still chose him and loved him, although he knew what he would do to him.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when someone there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Peter, the one who is so frightened he can't stand up for his friend. Peter, who was all talk, so brave while there was nothing to be scared of, so determined he would be a great friend, the one who reassured Jesus, the one who made him promises, but he couldn't keep them. He was so scared. He was scared for his life. He didn't stop loving Jesus, he didn't stop caring for him, but that wasn't enough. And he was so disappointed in himself. He felt guilty. He wanted to be the great friend, the brave one, the hero. He was human. He was flawed. He wasn't perfect. But Jesus chose and loved him all the same.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home.
Mary, the mother, the one who is losing the thing most precious to her. She is watching crowds and crowds of people crying for her precious son to be killed. They are excited for the spectacle. They hate him in their hundreds. She knows he is going to die, and she knows she can do nothing about it. Her heart must be in agony. Her whole body racked with physical pain for the extreme emotion of a parent watching their child not only slip away from them, but be tortured. She is helpless, devastated, grieving. She is human. She is flawed. She isn't perfect. But she was still chosen by God to love his son more than anyone else.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And then they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spat on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. When they had finished mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him.
The soldiers, the ones who follow the crowd, give in to peer pressure, the trolls, the fun makers. One of the most painful readings of the Easter story, listening to how the soldiers, knowing Jesus was going to die, thought that wasn't enough, took the horrible situation he was in as an opportunity to abuse him further. And I'm sure we all think we would never be there, never do that. But haven't we been in situations with a group of peers who impact our decisions? Where we don't feel we can do what is right because we would be ostracised by the people around us? They were human. They were flawed. They weren't perfect. But Jesus loved and forgave them too.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do, then, with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Pilate, the coward, the one who turned his back? Pilate knew Jesus did not deserve to be crucified. He was sure. He was convinced. But the people cried for Jesus' death. They roared for the release of Barabbas. Pilate could have done something. He could have gone against the crowd, chosen to release Jesus. He didn't. But he wanted to show he wasn't a part of this. He washed his hands of it. He put the blame on others. Did that mean he wasn't wrong? It's so easy to step away from situations, to say, "It wasn't me, I wasn't involved." But did he do anything to stop those who were wrong? Did he use his knowledge of what is right to fight for the good? But would any of us done any more in his situation? He was human. He was flawed. He wasn't perfect. But Jesus still forgave him, loved him, and died for his sins.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons.
Mary, and the mother of Zebedee, the ones who cared. The ones who came to look after Jesus even to the end and after. The ones who would go to tend his body after death. The ones who were losing someone so special to them and wanted to do what they could. It must have seemed so little to be able to give, so inadequate. But it was love, deep love, for someone who had had such an impact on their lives, who had loved them despite their humanity, who had cared for them despite their flaws, who had been there for them and chosen them despite their imperfections.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things.
The centurion, the one who eventually believed. The one who was on the wrong side, who should have been against Jesus. The one who probably had been, who probably believed the hype, gone along with what he was told. But also the one whose mind was open. The one who saw for himself and truly believed. The one, among others, who believes but thinks it is too late. Among the ones who beat their breasts as they realise what they have done and believe they have realised too late. The ones who had to see to believe and then realised they missed so many other signs. The ones who were human, who were flawed, who were imperfect and late and doubted, but he still loved them. Still he prayed for their forgiveness.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others, let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminals rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserves. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise."
The criminal on the cross, who had sinned but was still forgiven. The one who was about to die and admitted he had done wrong and deserved the punishment. The one who had harmed others, who had not lived a good life. The one who at the last minute sees Jesus' love and asks for a tiny thing, "Jesus, remember me." He doesn't ask for the kingdom of God, but he gets it anyway. He doesn't ask for forgiveness, he gets it anyway. He doesn't ask for love, but he knows it is there for him. In spite of all he has done, his life of crime, his flaws, his imperfection, his humanity, Jesus chooses him, loves him, forgives him, without him even asking.
Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
And Jesus, the human, the one who was so driven, so committed, but still was scared, still asked if God could take this suffering away. The one who cried out to God on the cross, "Where are you? Why have you left me?" How many times did you see yourself in these people? In their beauty or their flaws? In the mistakes, the exhaustion, the selfishness? In the fear, the darkness, the doubt? In the grieving, the love, the pain? In the humanity? Jesus knew all of these were his friends, his family, his chosen ones, and they were just like all of us. Flawed and broken, loving but scared, doing stupid things, having regrets, feeling inadequate, crying, mourning, missing, despairing, going through all the emotions. They were human. They were flawed. They weren't perfect, but they were the people Jesus chose and loved. We are human. We are flawed. We are not perfect, but we are the people Jesus chooses and loves.